Hello, I'm Manana Ratiani. I'm from Georgia, from Teachers Professional Development Center, and I'm working also as a focal point at the Education for Sustainable Development. The topic of our lecture is how to integrate sustainable development principles into the general education, and within our lecture we'll have an overview of whole institutional approach to sustainable development, and also we'll have a case study from my country. So as you know, since 21st century, we have implemented sustainable development principles through education, and I think it was very important because of many countries starting to develop their own curriculums, and they have found their own way how to integrate sustainable development principles into the educational systems. But there are some improvements that the reports of the countries are showing, but there is no breakthrough through sustainable development principles. So firstly, when we are speaking about the whole institutional approach, it is showing that stand-alone projects are not having a much impact on educational system. Schools are trying to develop a project. Maybe they are doing the projects about non-violence behavior, or they are planting trees, or they are having lectures about climate change, biodiversity, and etc. But this is welcomed, but their impact is really limited. So in 2005, in Lithuania, ministers of environment and educational system gathered together, and they adopted the strategy on education for sustainable development. Since that, the decade is taking place, and there are recommendations about how to implement those principles, the whole institutional approach, having embedded sustainable development principles into whole curricula. I think that these recommendations were shared through all the regions in the world, as the UNEC region, Asia Pacific region, and others too. What is important here is that some of the countries are trying to do that in curriculum, others are doing extracurricular work, but the meaning is that a teacher who is alone can't do that because their impact is very limited also, and we could say that they could burn out simply. And if there is no whole school communities involved in that process, that means that their practice can't be expanded, and when helping hand is needed, nobody could support them. Also, the whole institutional approach is important because of the students could transfer their knowledge from the schools that they gained to the real world, and because of that they are making a linkage with the knowledge to the real world life issues and challenges and problems. So now we will speak about whole institutional approach or whole school approach. There are 5 main pillars of the whole school approach, and in the center, in the middle, as you can see on the scheme, there is a teaching and learning process, and the teaching and learning process is effective where the whole school community is involved in that. And what we mean by that, firstly, we have to consider that teachers should step away or shrink their practice for teacher-centered to student-centered learning, and in this process it's important to have integrated teaching process, and also there is a very important task that project-based learning is taking place, which is an active method for the teacher, and where students act like self-directed, and they are like investigators, and they are investigating the real-life problems and challenges. And also it's important because the teacher is not acting like a traditional teacher, but they are adopting the practice of facilitators. And also place-based learning could take place wherever the place is not a natural traditional classroom only, but also the place could be a natural surrounding or community act as a venue of the teaching and learning process. I think that's also important because the students can ask more about questions about why they are learning, because the motivation is higher and they see the meaningfulness of the learning process. And also when we are speaking about the new approaches, a community-based approach is one of the most important one, because the community could act like a learning space also, and for community, school also can become very important place. So the libraries at school and other facilities also could be used by the community. So schools have to try to improve their ecological footprint. That means that they have to think about how to minimize energy use, water usage, how to recycle the waste and reduce the waste within the schools. That means that not alone the administrators, schools, students and parents should be involved in this process, but all the staffs that are within the school community, like drivers, cafeteria workers, maintenance staff and others too. And also we could say that building and grounds should fulfill the sustainability criteria. That means that not only extent of vegetations could enhance the visual side of the schools, but also they could act as a venue for practices and experiential learning for the students. And also students and parents could participate in mulching process or gardening process, and that is meaningful because they would care more about environment in the future and within the school period. So I think that it's very important when we are having new buildings to construct them in energy efficient way. Sustainability is best achieved when collaboration is taking place. And so that means that collaboration is important on the educational institution levels. For example, when schools are having a joint projects or they're cooperating with universities, and they could also have a collaboration with the local communities, with also non-governmental organizations and community. And that's important because school will have access to the resources not otherwise available for them with different type of projects. So collaboration from one side is important because of they will gain access to different resources. They also will, students will be involved in real world activities, and also it's important that it's one of the main competencies of the 21st century. When we're looking also at the scheme on the screen, we could find that a whole institutional approach to sustainability is practiced in a variety of ways, and they differ from each other. That means that a school could start when they are not involved in sustainability to identify gaps that are existing within their school, and if they will find those gaps, they could start by self-evaluation. They then creating a plan, then start to implement that plan in the process, and then back they are coming to self-evaluation. And in such a cycle, if this cycle is there in place, that means that from not engaged schools we can receive the schools where sustainability and these principles are embedded into whole school approach, and as in the curricula, also in the other activities of the school, and extracurricular activities too. Many countries are trying to find their own path in embedding sustainable development principles into their curriculum. And from that, it's very important to have teachers and administration and students who are willing to change the situation regarding to sustainability. Also, there are some very interesting projects. For example, the United Nations Associated Schools are celebrating International Days, and we took their experience and we tried to incorporate that in our country and modify that. What does that mean? We're trying to put a sustainability calendar in the agenda of our schools in Georgia, and that means that we're taking some international days and trying to fix those two with the international days, and the days are fixed on the calendars that you can see on the screen. And who will implement those calendars? Firstly, we'll try to pilot that project with our winners of the Teachers Prize, which is a campaign of World Teachers Prize, and we have selected 10 finalists in 2017 and 2018, and those finalists are competent enough to bring an experiment in the ground in my country, and that means that they will try to expand those practices to others via collecting the best practices, putting their experience online, and also making some kind of workshops maybe on those days. And what will be there? That means that the whole school will have to put on those days that are fixed on calendar the exact goals, approach or topic. As for example, for goal 1, it's a poverty goal. There is an International Day of Poverty Eradication that is celebrated on October 17, and that means that on that day, in all subjects, all teachers should somehow incorporate the idea of the poverty, how to eradicate it, or the school could run also integrated project where different subject teachers will participate, and that means that awareness of poverty will rise at school level and students will have different options to participate in that. And also for other goals, there are fixed dates that are on the screen. For example, for the gender goal number 5, there is an International Day of the Elimination of the Violence Against the Woman that is celebrated on November 25, and the whole school could have different projects and topics on the gender issue. And also it's important because of if there are very important days on the national calendar, they could incorporate to the sustainability calendar those days too, which are relevant to the goals. So there are fixed goals, there are fixed dates for these goals, but also it should be added or modified according to the country's need. So what will we have as a consequence of this project? We'll have a whole institutional approach that is existing within the school, and the sustainability is embedded into the curricula, and also extracurricular activities are running there. And also we will have not only 1 or 2 teachers that are participating in sustainability and they are trying to incorporate in their practice those ideas, but also a whole school community will be involved in that, and that means that awareness raising will happen, and by 2030 the sustainable goals will be achieved. And also it's important because that special events will be held to that, and we will have not only environmental issues but social and economic issues will be there in place, and interaction between the schools will happen because those best teachers will share their practice with other schools, and this collaboration is very meaningful for extending this practice.